Ready?
Hit it!
Hello everyone and welcome to Variety Theatre, the Spice of Life podcast with Maria Lovelady
and Michael Alan-Bailey, a podcast that aims to bring all things variety out of the wings and into the limelight.
So without further ado, let's get this show on the road. Coming up on today's show, we are going to talk about how variety theatre ties into our favourite Met Gala looks.
We find out which theatre the Theatres Trust described as the most important surviving early musical to be seen anywhere.
And we find out which variety performer director Mark Bell would love to be. The answer may surprise you.
So, how are you this week, Michael?
I'm really good. You know what we haven't actually talked about yet that we have to is the fact that we did our show.
We did our show.
Twice Nightly is done again. We did it again.
And it went down really well. Thank you to all of you that came and supported the show for the first time or whether you saw it again. We really, really appreciate it. We had such a great day, didn't we?
We've had such an amazing day. Just everything was in our favour, wasn't it? It was a beautiful day weather-wise. We had a great crowd. It was a great atmosphere. I think this will be a really good opportunity just to thank everybody involved with the Liverpool Theatre Festival for an amazing season, an amazing run, such brilliant performances and great reviews. Like everything did so well. The only fly in the ointment for me, which was my moustache.
Your moustache.
I'm still having nightmares about the moustache, to be honest.
Tell everybody what happened to your moustache.
Basically, I put the moustache on over my makeup. So I put my makeup on first and then the moustache, whereas I should have put the moustache on and then the makeup. Now, bearing in mind, I only have the moustache on for one number in the show, and that's just the opening number. So once the opening number's done, the moustache comes off anyway. But I could just, because it was a really hot day, wasn't it? It was a really warm day.
Oh, tell me about it. I stood in a fur coat for the whole of it.
And I could just feel the side of the moustache peeling off. And it fell off halfway through.
It did. You recovered it really, really well by incorporating it into the number. And one of our reviews actually said that they didn't know whether we did it on purpose or by accident, but maybe it should be a permanent feature in the next show.
The thing is, I think if you tried to do that again on purpose, it would never happen.
It just wouldn't work.
You could never do it on purpose. It's only one of those things that could happen by accident. But the moustache looked great. I thought that as I was looking down on it at the floor. I thought, oh, that looks good.
Well, we've got some fabulous photos of you before the moustache fell off, after the moustache fell off, and during the moustache falling off.
Well, that ties into my fact, actually, today. Do you want me to give you my fact? Now, this is one of those facts that to any Laurel and Hardy aficionados out there, which I am a massive Laurel and Hardy aficionado, and I know Mark Bell is, who we're going to hear an interview with a little bit later on. This is one of those facts that kind of, to anyone that knows anything about Laurel and Hardy, they go, oh, that's really basic, that's really obvious. But I think to the masses, it's something that they wouldn't know. So James Finlayson, who was a really, really famous supporting player of Laurel and Hardy's, he was in so many of their films, usually as their foil. He always had a moustache. He always had a big moustache, and he was known for it. He had the bald head and the moustache and the kind of the squinty eye, and he was kind of, always the villain. I don't think he ever appeared in a film without that moustache, and it was fake. He never had a real moustache in real life. It was fake his entire career. In the early days of their career, it was almost, they were being formed as a trio, really, Laurel, Hardy and Finlayson. They were all kind of paired together, and it was more so James Finlayson and Stan Laurel. It was only later on they saw more potential in the chemistry between he and Hardy, and James Finlayson kind of sadly was a little bit ousted. But he came back, and like I say, he was in so many of their films, their features and their shorts, as a fabulous supporting player. I mean, he's one of my favorites. And yeah, that moustache was fake. He went through his entire career with a fake moustache.
Well, I'm sure if he has an autobiography, there would be at least one moment where his moustache fell off too. It's not just you. I think you're in good company with that fake moustache.
Well, that's what I thought. I'll tie in my fact to moustache facts. and just kind of
love it.
Wardrobe malfunctions and costumes in general.
If anyone else has got any more moustache facts, please send them in to us. We would love to hear.
And we also love hearing about wardrobe malfunctions and costume malfunctions. They're always fun stories.
We do. Janet Jackson springs to mind.
Thank God that didn't happen in Twice Nightly.
Oh gosh. To me or you? Don't know which would be kinkier.
I know it would grab more headlines.
Oh. Well, speaking of costumes and wardrobe malfunctions.
There we go. You see what a smooth link that was.
We would love to talk to you all about our favorite vintage, would you say?
I don't know really.
Vintage
what would you say? It's just an aesthetic event, isn't it? Which is the Met Gala.
But our favorite vintage inspired costumes, outfits from the Met Gala.
Well, there seemed to be a lot of very retro inspired costumes, weren't there? Especially from people that we love and that we often talk about, people that we've researched a lot from doing the show and from doing the podcast. People like the Ziegfeld Follies, Josephine Baker, Claudette Colbert, all of these amazing people. And it seemed to be very, very heavily inspired by those looks this year.
It did. And who was your favorite look out of them all?
Oh, without a doubt, it was Iman. My favorite was Iman. She just was incredible, wasn't she? It's who said the famous quote, you know, it's not so much about the costume as the woman wearing it.
Oh, I don't know.
Is it do you know what? I actually think it was a question on the Chase the other day. That's why it's like fresh in my head. But it's true. Like, that costume was incredible, but she was just something else in it. You know, the way she wore it and the way she held herself. I mean, she's one of the most beautiful women in the world anyway. And I just think it all came together. That look just really came together. And I think,
to be able to pull that off, that look with that confidence and style and just stand there and make that work is incredible.
Totally. But I loved Emily Blunt's dress as well. I thought Emily Blunt looked beautiful.
With that head Lamar.
Yes,
that
it was like
Lamar headpiece. I loved.
Yeah, it was kind of a hybrid, wasn't it? Of it was like a Joan Crawford inspired base with the Hedy Lamarr edge. So that was a really good kind of fusion of those two costumes. She looked beautiful.
I loved Yara Shahidi, who came basically dressed as Josephine Baker, who is one of my favorites. Yes, we love Josephine Baker, and she went all out with the veil and the little curl on her forehead, which I absolutely loved. And she looks stunning. And it was made something so vintage, really fresh and modern, which is our favorite thing.
I really think, because, you know, that the idea of the Met Gala having a theme didn't actually come in until the early 70s. You know, before that, it's been going since 1948. And prior to that, it wasn't themed. The theme only came in the early 70s. And one of the first themes, I think it was the second year that they themed it, the theme was the 10s, the 20s, and the 30s. And I just think I would love to see, well, I mean, I say that I would love to see a revival of that, but we kind of got it this time, don't you think?
I think we did, yeah. I mean, I think everyone sort of went their own way, but because of the theme, it just lent itself so much to that sort of vaudeville, old Hollywood style, and it was just gorgeous. It was just so beautiful. I mean, Billie Eilish has a very emo aesthetic, usually with the black hair, with the green, and obviously she's gone blonde recently, but she came out in that full Marilyn, like it was just unabashed, unashamedly full Marilyn, and I just thought that was stunning as well, and she just absolutely rocked that. And to see someone so young, I mean, what is she now, Billie Eilish, do you reckon 20? Go all out with the vintage was just absolutely gorgeous. And I loved on our Instagram page, if you visit our Instagram page, you will see that we have put all our favorite Met looks on and compared them to the original vintage looks. And you can vote for your favorite. So we've got the Kylie Jenner versus Audrey Hepburn. She came in that very beautiful My Fair Lady dress. But what I loved was that Mike spotted Little Nas X. Who did he come as?
The Machine Man from Metropolis.
Which was definitely not his intention, but I absolutely
Or
love.
was it? Or was it? We don't know. Maybe it was his intention.
We don't know. Maybe we'll try and get Little Nas X on the old podcast.
What did you think of Kim Kardashian's look?
Oh, I just kind of didn't get it, but I don't know whether it was referencing something that I just didn't get.
Well, have you seen the GIF? There's a GIF of her and somebody's like photoshopped her like in with all the Dementors over Azkaban. It's so good. You genuinely can't tell which one she is.
That would be so good. If they did a Harry Potter themed Met Gala, I think I would Meg Barrett.
Who would you go as?
Oh, Trelawney, I think. Madame Trelawney. Just in the hopes that Emma Thompson would send me a letter just to say, hey girl.
I'd just go in an old pillowcase.
I'm with a sock.
A Met Gala with a sock.
Just asking Kim Kardashian for a sock. Just go up to the richest person there and ask them to set you free.
Just go up to the richest person and say, Mike is a free elf, and walk off.
Well, not only have all those celebrities been busy this week, Mike, I have also been busy.
Come on, tell us what you've been doing. Tell us what you've been doing.
Well, you yourself have been relaxing up in Scotland on holiday. So I had to go out solo this week and do our interview with director Mark Bell, who's directing a show called Horse Country at the Wilton's Music Hall in London from the 28th of September to the 2nd of October.
Now, this sounds absolutely incredible. The show sounds incredible, but also the theatre sounds incredible. I mean, this is a real, authentic music hall. Still going, still in operation.
It is still going. So my fact today is to fill anyone in that doesn't know about Wilton's Music Hall, just to tell you a bit about it, because it's such an interesting place. So the Theatre Trust described Wilton's as the most important surviving early music hall to be seen anywhere.
I mean, even the photos that you sent, I mean, I wasn't there, unfortunately, and I was devastated that I wasn't there, especially when you started sending me all the photos that you took at the theatre. It just looked so incredible. It looked so atmospheric. You could feel the ambience of that old time music hall tradition. And I was jealous as hell that I wasn't there.
Oh, it was amazing. I had such an amazing day and everybody there was so kind. So thank you to everyone at Wilton's and especially Mark for taking time out of his schedule and letting me in on a little bit of rehearsal to have our conversation. But I'll tell you a little bit more about Wilton's. So Wilton's, like so many music halls, began life as a pub in the 18th century. And in 1839, a concert room was built at the back of the pub. And the building's life began as an entertainment venue, which we researched so much, haven't we? This is just the normal way of how music hall developed and grew into what it was. So John Wilton saw the building's true potential and he built the music hall that is standing today. His theme was to provide a West End experience with all the glamour and the comfort of the West End for the working classes in the East End. And this is what we love about music hall, isn't it? That you didn't have to go to those big West End theatres to get a fantastic show. And you could go to the East End, you could go to Scotland, you could go up to Liverpool, to Manchester and get a great show. So Wilton's just encapsulates everything that we love about music hall and why we decided to research this genre in the first place.
And it's one of those things, isn't it? I mean, from everything we've researched about music hall, it does seem to be one of the rare mediums in those days that really catered more for the working classes.
Absolutely. And Wilton had the music hall furnished with these lavish mirrors, these sparkling chandeliers. He installed heating and lighting and a ventilation system. So before you even get to the entertainment, if you think of what that area of London will have been like in that period of time, you would have just wanted to have gained access to a building like that. That's a great place to go and hang out and drink and be with your friends and family. But not only did he do this to the building, he got the top entertainers of the day at the venue. So he would take people from the West End, he'd put them on at the East End. He took them from all over the UK, from the circus, the ballet, fairground performers. I mean, can you imagine? This place must have been buzzing back in the day.
They must have been thrilled to bits, especially when you say when it comes off the back of performing in the back rooms of pubs.
Yeah, to have this absolutely lavish
all of a sudden, yeah.
Amazing. So unfortunately, in 1881, Wilton's closed its doors, and that area of London had become notorious for extreme poverty and not very nice living conditions. So it was bought by the East London Methodist Mission, and it remained open for 70 years, the building, as a charity. And it actually stood throughout many famous incidences that happened in the East End, such as the Blitz in London.
Really? So it didn't stay as a music hall?
No, it's so.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that at all.
Yeah.
So when did it come back as a music hall? When was it rediscovered as a music hall?
So it was in the 60s. It was about to be demolished. So the council wanted to regenerate. They didn't really see the joy in the history of this place. And there was a big campaign that was led by theatre historian John Earle, who got on board the poet John Betjeman to keep the theatre alive. And they also got on board some of our old mates down at the British Music Hall Society.
Oh, stop. It's the circle of life.
That society had just been formed, and those together all campaigned to keep it open. Now, why do we love the British Music Hall Society? Why do we love them, Mike? Adam Borzone.
Adam Borzone. Everybody loves Adam Borzone.
So he was in our first episode. And if you want to know more about the British Music Hall Society and Adam Borzone, who is the current chair, go back and listen to our first episode because he is a fountain of knowledge. So they won, and they got to keep the building. It was left standing, but it was still a bit derelict. It wasn't great. And lots of people over the years, such as Spike Milligan, the BBC, the National Lottery, they all campaigned and put money in to regenerating the music hall, with former artistic director Francis Mayhew. And it's now been fully refurbished to its fabulous former glory, and you can see all sorts of entertainment going on there. And in 2016, it actually won London's Building of the Year. It's that fabulous. So what a story, what a journey this building has been on.
That's incredible. To be built, to be purpose built for one thing, get changed into something completely different, and then end up back what it was originally made for. And
for it to look as stunning now as it did then. I have to say, when you're there, the history of the place is like hanging in the air. It's the atmosphere is so magical. There is a very famous mahogany bar that you can still go to and have a drink. All that brickwork and the stage. It's a really unique experience for any audience member. I would urge anybody that's interested in theatre to go and check it out.
Now you're making me feel worse that I didn't go.
Well, what a better time to go when Horse Country is going to be playing there in the next few weeks. I'll be there next Saturday. So if any of our listeners are planning on going to see Horse Country next Saturday, then give me a shout, because I would love to meet you there. And if you can't make it, then as Mike said before, do check out our Instagram page, because I've got some fabulous pictures from behind the scenes at Wilton's there as well.
Do you know what's amazing to me now, knowing all that, is that the detail, like I said before, the detail and the ambience that was evident in your photos kind of wasn't always there. You know, surely when it was turned into a mission, it would have been changed. And you know that they've gone to such efforts to put it back to what it would have looked like.
Yeah.
When it was a music hall. That's all the more incredible, because you think, wow, somebody's really gone to the time and the trouble and the effort to give it that feel.
Exactly. And I think that the types of shows that are still on there reflect that experience. And if you want a night out that's just that little bit different from your every other night out that you go to, then I would definitely suggest going down to Wilton's, because it is such a beautiful, unique experience. So that brings us on to Mark Bell, who is directing Horse Country at Wilton's.
I'm really sad. I'm really sad. You don't understand how gutted I am. I had a little sneak preview of this interview before I had a little listen to it, and I'm just so insanely jealous that I didn't get to talk to him and meet him, because I just loved it. I'm just so insanely jealous because I just found him so fascinating. I was hanging on his every word. So tell us a little bit about Mark.
Yes, so Mark is probably best known for directing The Play That Goes Wrong, which is still currently running on the West End. It won the Olivier Award for Best New Comedy. It's been on in Broadway. I think it won awards. I think it won for Best New Play there as well, and for the What's on Stage Awards. It's just been a phenomenal success, that show. And it's also been translated into many different languages around the world as well. Fantastic, funny show that I would recommend to anybody if you can get to go and see it. Mark's also directed the comedy about a bank robbery, and he also directed Waiting for Godot. And this year, Mark is going to be directing Cluedo.
That is fabulous. How do we get in it? How do we get seen? You know, when I was 13, I think I was about 13, I played Mrs. Peacock.
Did you?
I did.
In what?
It was just like a drama school production of Cluedo. And I actively campaigned for the role of Mrs. Peacock because I genuinely believed that nobody could play it better, and nobody did. I think what it was the script had been just blatantly taken from the film. You know, the film Clue with Tim Curry.
Yes.
Fabulous film. Absolutely fabulous. So it was kind of a stage adaptation of that script.
A school stage adaptation.
A school stage adaptation of all things. Of all things. Like, I do remember the line where Mrs. Peacock says to the maid, you know, do you have a restroom? I just need to. And the maid goes, oui. And she goes, no, I just need to powder my nose. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I didn't play it. I mean, the way I've just done it then was like very like American vampy. I didn't play it like that at the time.
What did you play it like?
I think I played a very like Emily Howard from Little Britain. You know what I mean? It was all very, oh, hello, darling.
What did you wear? Can you remember?
I had a blue dress on, which I borrowed from my nan,
mm-hmm.
and blue shoes, which I borrowed from my nan. I had a blue feather boa, I had a black wig and a cigarette holder and gloves.
Doesn't sound like any different to any other Saturday night you've had since.
Well, who knew that would become the staple of my wardrobe? That's just the standard. That's just what I wear. I'm wearing it right now, actually.
Well, there you go. And I hope Mark does listen to this. You've got a Mrs. Peacock right there.
Well, the one thing that I know about Mark, and what higher praise do you want from this, is that J.J. Abrams, the director, who obviously now is like world globally famous for doing all the Star Wars films, called Mark a genius.
He did. So
there you go. If JJ's calling you a genius, you're in.
You're in. So hopefully he's got genius casting skills and casts you as
Mrs. Peacock. Right, come on, let's listen. Let's listen to the interview. I'm dead excited to hear it. Now, just to make you all aware that Mark's interview does feature a few expletives. So we do apologize in advance if anybody is offended by that, but they're only little ones.
There's only a couple.
To be honest, I think it's a miracle that we haven't slipped up yet, to be honest.
and there could have been many, many more. Here it is.
Very nice to see you here today, Mark.
You too.
So I would love to know, how has the variety of theatre spiced up your life?
Spiced up my life?
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting way of phrasing that. I mean, in terms of what I do, the kind of comedy that I do, there are direct lines with clown and commedia dell'arte and things like that, right through musical, vaudeville, and variety. Particularly, all of that comedy has some kind of direct address. So you're always dealing directly with the audience, and the same with stand-ups do now. But also, the clown traditions that I draw on for most of my teaching and for all of the shows really all of the comedy shows I do comes through musical, through Laurel and Hardy and Chaplin and Buster Keaton.
Mm-hmm.
And it's finding those characters, those rather big comic characters that found their roots in these rather raucous kind of places. Do you know what I mean? In musicals. So I think that certainly kept me on my toes.
And how do you think that modern audiences respond to those characters? So we're talking like 100 years old. We've been inspired by these characters.
Well, so I don't think the characters in essence have changed. I think the outer accoutrements of it kind of change. So you're no longer looking at someone that literally dresses like I am I look at me, I'm silly.
Yeah.
You reduce it down, particularly when you're working on screen. I mean, I would argue that Alan Partridge and David Brent are clowns. Do you know what I mean? They're just working in a different medium where you're looking at something that much more accurately reflects what real people might look like while being complete idiots.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? They don't tell you the costumes and the all of the other bits and pieces. The shtick around it doesn't tell you I'm being funny.
So they're where modern audiences would look for the modern day
I think
clowns.
so, yeah. I mean, that kind of, obviously if you looked at real musical routines now, they would feel very dated, very over the top, very ridiculously racist. There are some things like some... I was researching the show that I'm hopefully going to do at Clapham Grand with Ali Wolf, and some of the routines that I came across were like, you can't even say the titles.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And that's something that needs to be, addressed if you were ever to look at a show that was to tell the history of the musical, that was there and this is why it was there. Not to kind of excuse or condone it, simply to kind of you can't just ignore that.
Exactly, because these performers were working there, so they were incredibly diverse shows.
My personal take on it from the research I've done, which is hopefully for the show that will happen in the next few years, was that actually it was an incredibly inclusive place to work. They, everybody, all kinds of misfits and weirdos and people doing really bizarre acts, all kind of lived in this like circus-like kind of environment, and their little world was there. They looked after each other. I mean, we want to centre the show around the musical strike, which happened the early part of last century, 1900. And they basically, they tried to shut all the musicals down, all of the performers, because they were being so exploited by the managers and the owners of the buildings. And the big stars of the day, like Mary Lloyd, came out. And she's a great character in herself. I don't know why there should be some kind of movie made about her.
Yeah, definitely.
Because she was an amazing character, and she was a tough woman. She, in a man's world, incredibly, where he couldn't even legally own property, she was on top of it. She managed herself, she promoted herself, and was the kind of hit star of musical of the day. Very rich. But she went out and sang on the picket lines. She went around the picket lines in London and sang, and, got the crowds behind them, and in the end they won.
And of course, these people were all working without microphones and stuff. So to go and sing on a picket line, she would have been heard. She would have rallied the crowds and everything.
If you had a time machine and you could go back to see, if you go to Clapham Grand, which I love that building so much, it's 3 tiers, and it was built specifically by Jay Leno. Not Jay Leno.
No.
Jay Leno.
Dan Leno is who we did our episode about last week, who was billed as the funniest man on earth.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
So no, Jay Leno's not plenty American chat show host.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
You'll edit that out, right?
I'll do my best.
No, you wouldn't. No, so Dan Leno, had this place purpose-built as a musical variety theatre. But imagine if when you go in there, if you stand in the gods, you stand at the top, how on earth, with 600-700 drunks on a Saturday night in London, could you control that crowd without a microphone?
Insane.
Without recorded music? What did you do? You must have had the most incredible presence and way of dealing with how do you play off the audience, which is something that utterly fascinates me.
And of course, they will have been doing it from a young age.
Yeah.
So a lot of them grew up with it.
Absolutely,
so they didn't. They just will have worked out what works from watching other people and just doing it again and again.
Yeah.
There's not like an iPhone now where someone's going to film it and it's going to be on forever if you fail. Like you can just get up the next night and do it again.
They were allowed to develop their acts as they went along. You learned by trial and error, and sometimes the errors, the failures were absolutely agonising. I mean, there's great stories. Another thing I was doing about Stan Laurel, that the stories about his early days. He started. His dad was a theatre manager across Cumbria in the northeast of England, where I'm from. They were in Glasgow when Stan was becoming a young man, when he was 15, 16, and he wanted to be a performer, and his dad was dead against it. His dad said, no, you don't, you dare, you're going into management, that's where the money is. But Stan, behind his dad's back, kind of got an old tailcoat, got paid another comedian who worked for his dad to write him like a 15-minute slot, and went to do what we would kind of call an open mic slot. Like he got a little slot at a rival theatre called the Panopticon, known as the Pots and Pans in Glasgow. Now, the Pots and Pans was known for the fact that it was the roughest house in town, and all the ship workers would go down there, and the women from the fish markets. Now, the men would throw rivets and bolts at you, if you were crap, I'm sorry, if you weren't very good.
No, crap's fine. We can crap.
If you were crap, they'd throw rivets and bolts at you, which, you'd have an eye out or what I think. The women would throw fish heads and fish guts at you.
It's like I'm a celebrity or something, isn't it?
I think it's a little bit worse than that. I think, there's death on the cards here. But Stan Laurel went to do, that's where he went for his first thing. And it didn't go badly. He was all right. He was only 16, I think.
Can you imagine the nerve that you'd have to get up and do that? Like, even as a performer, that fills me with, sick.
But then it gets worse, because the last bit, the biggest laugh he got is he tripped as he exited on his tailcoat. It was too big for him. And his hat fell off. And that got the biggest laugh, which again is a hint as to where Stan was going to go with his comedy.
Yeah.
And he bent over the footlights to pick the hat back up. And as he looked, it was the first time he could really see the audience, because the footlights weren't blinding him. And in the front row, he looked directly into his dad's eyes. And his dad was just sitting there scowling.
Oh, my God.
Which I love that story so much. But yeah, you had to have nerves of steel to go.
Yeah, definitely. That. So where did you learn all of this craft? Because it's not something that's taught everywhere. It's a real niche. Where did you pick it up?
Well, I wouldn't say I learned how musical was done particularly. I've kind of developed in recent years an interest in the musical because the kind of clown that I was taught, I went to Jacques Lecoq School in Paris, has a connection to that. I mean, it's much more, it's in a theatre tradition, that kind of clown. And it's older than circus. The theatre clown is much older. So that's where it's from, really. And the way I do clown is very different to how I was taught, because I was, not to put too fine a point at it, crap at it while I was at school. I kind of didn't get it. And I was trying to play cute and force it, and I completely missed the point. And it wasn't really till I started doing shows, and I kept getting cast in comedies, and I was like, why? I'm not funny. And I started playing it really straight, because I thought the only way I can get through this is if I just don't try to be funny, just be straight. His stuff started to work, and I started
like a Buster Keaton style.
Well, yeah, I wasn't, but the thing is, I wasn't in any way trying to be funny. And Buster Keaton said famously that he was a terrible giggler. He had been, he corpsed all the time. But he just realised very early on that he was funnier when he expressed no emotion. Or he expressed the pain of what it was, rather than kind of laugh at it, if you see what I mean. And I think there's something so important in that. For me, that you must play the character and the painful, if it's painful, truth for that character in any moment, as you would for any other drama. Do you know what I mean? Or a Chekhov. The thing about clown, the danger is always, as soon as we see you think you're funny, it's not funny anymore.
Yeah.
For me. So there's lots of people do clown and that kind of comedy, all kinds of different ways. And I'm not saying I'm right and they're wrong. I'm just saying what works for me and my personal taste is, if I can see a character that is a human being, however large and stupid you're being, then it just works better. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
And that brings us on then to Horse Country, which you're directing at the moment, which is about two clowns, I believe.
Well, I don't think the writer would call them clowns. One of the things that's clear that there are references, it's an American play, and sometimes they appear to be like vaudeville entertainers.
Right.
Almost they could be wearing kind of old suits that are slightly dishevelled, like Mr. Cellophane in Chicago. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? That kind of... it's a bit of a musical theatre reference I just dropped in for you.
I love it. I love it. Now I can hashtag musical theatre.
Yep, that's right. And we're not going to costume them like that. We don't think. We're still kind of very early days, so we're playing around with it. But there are certain elements where it is like a vaudeville act, where it's really like a quick talk, cross-talk routine.
And it's set in America?
Yes.
Is this production in America?
It depends. When you say where it's set, never really tells you where it's set.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but yes, it's very much about America, I think.
Right.
And they are American characters. The dialogue's written in that accent, so we're using that. But yeah, they're like two vaudeville performers, stroke clowns, stroke idiots on stage, and they've just got some cards, but they've lost the 9 of diamonds, so they can't play, and they just talk to each other, and they play different games, and they certainly play games with the audience.
Right.
And I think it's a brilliant play, and I think it's much more challenging than that might make it sound, but it's not. But it's also very, very funny. And also we're getting to do it at Wilton's music hall, which, with the variety kind of elements of it, is so perfect. Because the theatre's so amazing here. I mean, it's such a beautiful place to work.
Exactly. I'd love to ask you about the play that goes wrong.
Yes.
Which you have directed in London, New York, and all over the world, from what we can gather.
I mean, I stopped doing it about 2 years ago. I handed over to my associate director, Sean Turner, and And then he immediately got to do Moscow and Seoul and places like that. Really pissed off. But I couldn't do it forever. But I mean, I did the original production starting at the Old Red Lion Pub Theatre in 2013, and now it's still open again in the West End, and it's on tour in the UK, and it's just about to open back up at New World Stages in New York.
In New York.
It was originally at the Lyceum on Broadway. Now it's transferred down to a slightly smaller theatre.
So why I'm asking you about that is
Yes.
because when we first met, we were talking about comedy being different all over the UK and
Yes.
also globally.
Yeah.
So last week we were talking about Dan Leno, who was billed as the funniest man on earth, but
Yes.
when he went over to Broadway, he completely bombed and
That's
he
right.
never quite recovered. And so how is it directing comedy when you're trying to keep the heart of a show that was written for an English audience? How is it then translating it to America and then to different languages?
Well, you see, this show, I think, is quite different from something that Dan Leno would have been doing, which would have been a much more... Excuse me, I'm going to try and say that again without slurring my words.
I'm going to keep that one in.
Fuck you. I'll swear,
And that
I'm gonna
right at the
swear
end.
it. Up your chuff, Maria. It would have been... Sorry, I think The Play That Goes Wrong is a very different kind of comedy to the kind of shtick that Dan Leno would have been doing, which would have been very much about English characters, using English accents, and just the verbal jokes, the references would have been different. It is closer to stand-up in a way than it is to a play.
Right.
Now, this is what I'm imagining. But The Play That Goes Wrong works on a very universal premise that is that we're all idiots and we all get things wrong. And we laugh. This is my thing about clown, is that it's not about... Clowns are not circus clowns. It is connected, but it's a very different form. There's nothing wrong with circus. I love circus, but it's the kind of clowns, the kind of comedy characters I do are about real people who just screw things up all the time, which I would argue that's what we're all like all the time. It's just we choose not to admit it because no one wants to be an idiot.
Yeah.
We just aren't.
Although once you've done clown training with you realise how much you're an idiot all the time.
Well, isn't it true though that once you start doing that training, that course, you suddenly start seeing them everywhere you go.
Oh yeah,
On the
but
bus,
mainly
yeah.
myself.
Yes,
mainly
100%.
myself. I'm like, that's a clown moment.
Well, I think I teach it in the way I teach it because it's not because I bloody well live it. I mean, it seems like my whole life is one series of catastrophe. You know what I mean? And you make comedy out of it. But The Play That Goes Wrong works on a kind of a very universal level of comedy. We all recognise something that goes wrong, that horrible moment, even if you've not been an actor, when something goes wrong on stage and you're stuck in front of an audience. We know that. We recognise it instinctively, what that feels like. And I don't think the laughter is laughing at people who get it wrong, like poking fun at them. I think it's one of recognition.
We've all been there.
Yeah, it's there, but for the grace of God, go on. It's the same reason kids laugh at people falling over. It's not because they think everyone else is an idiot. It's just they know exactly what that's like.
Yeah.
Falling over is inherently funny.
Yeah. Great. So I would love to know who is your favourite variety performer and why?
I think I have to say Stan Laurel. That's partly because I've been writing something about him with Paul Alexander, who's a wonderful TV and film writer. And I was going to say journey, I hate that word, his life was fascinating. I told you a bit of a story earlier on about starting at Glasgow, but then he joined Fred Carno's comedy troupe where he understudied Charlie Chaplin, and they became very, very good friends. But Carno's troupe, it's a better way to describe. It's not like just a group of comedians going on like a stand-up tour. This is like a rock and roll circus arriving in town. They were nuts. Do you know what I mean? There were all kinds of shenanigans going on, like off stage as well as on, and they were hugely popular. And Stan learned his craft, kind of working with these people, and was also a brilliant kind of observer of human beings and of how you turn that into comedy. And he had lots of kind of missteps and misfires on his road to becoming one of the most famous men in the world. You know, Chaplin, when they went to America, Chaplin jumped ship to go star in the movies. Stan fully expected that he would get that part, and he didn't. Fred Carno got another comedian, so Stan stropped off. And, ended up at one point penniless in London. You know what I mean? And finally managed to get himself back to America. And by accident, he decided he was good, because he'd started writing and he'd started getting on the other side of the camera, working on films, and he decided that's where he was going to be until some guy hurt himself on one film shoot and he had to step back in. And the producer was suitably impressed and said, you know what, I'm going to pair you with another guy who happened to be the guy who injured himself, and Stan had to fill in for him, whose name was Oliver Norville Hardy. So his life story kind of reads anyway like a film script. But also just, I grew up on Laurel and Hardy. Me and my dad used to watch it every Saturday. We used to put it, this is before you had video recorders, Maria, let alone streaming. They'd always put a Tom and Jerry cartoon and then a Laurel and Hardy short, or even a Laurel and Hardy film on BBC Two on Saturday afternoon. So me and my dad would sit and have a bowl of soup on a tray on our knees, watch Tom and Jerry, which my dad used to scream at. He loved it so much.
Really?
And then we'd watch Laurel and Hardy.
That's what's so good about that genre, though, isn't it? Is that it connects all generations, and you can put it on, with your granddad and with your grandson and all watch it together. Like, it's just, I don't know, it just doesn't, you don't have to be careful. There's no swearing. There's not much sex. And anything there is all suggestive.
I mean, it's interesting because Laurel, of the time, you just in comedy, you just didn't have things like that. You know, they're like children, Laurel and Hardy. They're not playing children; they're adults. Do you know what I mean? But they have this childlike kind of wonder at the world, particularly Stan Laurel's character. But behind the scenes, he was the one who was doing all the editing, kind of coming up with all the storylines. He didn't exactly write it, but a lot of it would have been through him. You know, he was the brains. Oliver Hardy used to finish his shoot and then go off and play golf all day. Do you know what I mean? So Stan was playing this naive idiot, but actually was the brains of the operation.
And he continued to write scripts, didn't he? After Hardy died, he still continued to write scripts for them both, which I think the determination of him, if he was going on at 16 in Glasgow, and then he finds himself penniless when Chaplin's made it, and he still continued to try, and even when Hardy died, he's still writing scripts. It's amazing, isn't it, the determination?
But, it also goes to show that at any point, we might all have these ambitions, and at any point something might just derail it, and it might never happen. Yeah. You know, he was very lucky. It was a series of accidents that actually got him to meet Oliver Hardy and find this one works. This is what's going to... Because, he spent a lot of time touring America doing a kind of Chaplin impersonation show, as a lot of other people did, and he was better at it because he'd actually worked with Chaplin, but he hated that as well because it's like, it wasn't his.
Yeah.
It wasn't his.
Weirdly like being your mate or something, like cashing in on your mate's success. I found it weird, researching our show, I read Charlie Chaplin's autobiography, and he doesn't mention Stan Laurel.
He doesn't.
So strange, even though there's so much, they spent so much time together in those early days.
Stan always mentioned him. He always mentions him in his writing, and they were big friends. But Chaplin wrote him out. Chaplin was a businessman. I mean, he knew exactly how to promote himself. He fictionalized his past, as much as he liked. Stan was much more straightforward than that. He just no, this is what happened. He didn't romanticize.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But Charlie always, I think, that's terrible. I wasn't there. I don't know these people, but it seems to me Charlie Chaplin always had an eye for how am I going to make sure I kind of cement my legacy? How am I going to make sure the money keeps coming in?
Definitely.
You know what I mean?
And it worked.
And it worked.
For both of them.
But Stan was still very incredibly successful. I mean, the tragedy of Laurel and Hardy was that at a certain point the studios took creative control away from Stan and started wanting to take control themselves, and it screwed them because the later films just were nowhere near as good.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I know that you've had a very successful career and you've been all over
it's not finished yet.
All over the world. It's still successful, and maybe the answer will be where we are today. But I would love to know, what's your favourite theatre?
God, that's a really hard one. But you know what? I would say I love Clapham Grand just because of the beauty of the building and the fact that Ali, who runs it, is so open to how we can use it. So I want to try and do a show there that's interactive, though. You're moving around the building and we're using all the back corridors, and we use the history of the building as like a character in the show. So that's one of my favourite theatres in London, definitely. I have still very sentimental memories of, I got my first job working at a little art centre in Milton Keynes before you were born.
I don't know, depends when it was.
1987.
Oh, 1 year.
1 year.
1 year out, yeah.
All right.
Not as far off as you thought.
I was only 21, so come on. I was a young thing. But they were introducing performing arts to the little art centre, and they had an old barn because it was on an old manor house site. It was a beautiful site, and like Milton Keynes had sprawled over it, like it did over a lot of other things. And so I set up this little theatre, which was no more than just a room with a horrible...
You set it up yourself?
Well, I set it up because we had to do performances. The room was there, but it had no backstage. It just had like 2 doors on the side, which are like big patio doors you could open, and one little door at the back. So when I started booking small-scale companies to come in, they were like, no, you can't enter from there, you have to enter through the audience. And the first rake we had, which was tiny, I built myself, because they had workshops. They had, and one of the guys kind of designed it for me, and I had to go and kind of cut all the chipboard.
Nice.
And I remember going out in this van and getting all these cheap chairs, which are these wobbly, horrible, bright yellow chairs, which kept breaking. And, we then, health and safety would have gone nuts if they'd seen this place. Because I was literally sellotaping the chairs together, putting them together with masking tape, so they wouldn't fall apart. And I built this little rig. It even had a handrail for the side. And
God.
And it was useless because it was useless because it didn't have, it was so low level, the steps up, that there was just like stairs. You still couldn't see much. But I did a lot of performing myself with the groups I set up in, amateur groups I set up there, and also I started seeing a lot of theatre just there and in the other theatres around the area, and a lot of that kind of convinced me that this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. And from there I went to Lecoq. So it was that. So that I just have very fond memories of this young idiot not knowing what he was doing, but setting up this space. And I met some amazing people, and we did some things that I wouldn't hold up to be like great works of art or anything. But boy, we had a good time. Mm.
You learn that way, don't you? I think.
Oh,
small
God,
budget, small space.
There's nothing in a way better than going. It's like an old Mickey Rooney film was like, hey, we can do the show in my dad's barn. and this literally was a barn. And, we did do a lot of stuff. And again, some of it was pretty utter rubbish. But there was stuff in there that made me kind of go, I like this a lot. And that's why I became an actor and then director.
Perfect. Well, this brings me on to my last question, which is, talent aside, so God-given any other talent, what style of variety performer would you be?
You know what? I would have liked to have been Mary Lloyd. I'd like to have been a woman.
Just actually her.
I used to have someone like, I want to be a woman that ballsy and that amazing that she could hold 1,000 people kind of wrapped just by singing some songs and telling some jokes. That kind of performer. Obviously, I can't be Mary Lloyd, but, that kind of thing. Yeah, I'd love to have tried that. I never, ever wanted to do stand-up. It scared the shit out of me, and I don't think I'd be very good at it at all. And it's not my style of comedy, really. I like Laurel and Hardy, I like Buster Keaton. But there's something so attractive about putting on a big costume and going out and belting a song out.
Definitely. Do you sing?
Yes, I am. I made my living singing country and western when I was a student in Paris.
Did you?
I certainly did.
I did not know that. Well, maybe we need a little sample for the podcast at the end.
If only I'd brought a guitar.
I didn't know that. Who do you think, maybe not really recently, but who do you think is a modern day Mary Lloyd? Do we have anyone like that now?
Oh, yeah, definitely. They're out there. I'm trying to think who it would be. I mean, there's so many strong performers out at the minute. I don't want to say that. I don't really know. I think she was kind of a one-off. She was,
It's like a different type of art form.
It's a different type of art form.
Now.
You wouldn't do it like that now. You'd have to, as well as being like Mary Lloyd, I'd have to go back in time to be working in, 1902.
If only we could.
If only we could. Just to see what it was like would be enough.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That I think if I could have a time machine and had one day, that's where I would go.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely.
It's that or the dinosaurs.
Well, yeah, but I've seen Jurassic Park one too many times to take my chances there, I think.
But what if they got it wrong, Marie? What if they're not like that?
What if they're like little puppies and actually you could just stroke them?
Well, they may well have had feathers.
That's true. But that doesn't mean they wouldn't have eaten me.
Oh, no, they would have eaten you, yeah.
Yeah, it just means I could have had a nice feather boa after it.
Right, okay. Slightly weird where this conversation's just gone.
So, quick fire round.
Right.
Don't think about it, you just have to answer me straight away. Mm-hmm. Charlie Chaplin or Buster Keaton?
Buster Keaton.
Play that goes wrong in Italian or Hungarian?
Hungarian.
Press night party or stage door sneak out?
Press night party.
Observational comedy or slapstick comedy?
Slapstick.
Tom or Jerry?
Jerry.
I like that that's the one that it took you the longest to think about.
That's the most important question.
I think so. I'm quite glad you brought them up, actually, because I put that down. I thought, I bet he loves Tom and Jerry.
I mean, observational comedy versus slapstick is kind of not fair. It's like, say, you want cricket or rugby, they're both games, and, yeah, fair enough. you prefer one or the other, but it doesn't mean one's bad and one's good.
Well, it doesn't mean that Tom's any worse than Jerry. It's just who you prefer.
No, Jerry is much better than Tom.
Why?
Because Tom's a cat. Cats are evil.
What, have you ever stolen a Tom and Jerry gag for any of your shows, do you think?
A Tom and Jerry one?
Even subconsciously. They're so good.
Yes, I mean, I think there's got to be a lot of stuff about being hit in the face by frying pans. I'm sure we've done stuff that's like that. I mean, in Play That Goes Wrong, the shield swings down and whacks someone in the face. I mean, yes, that kind of, that sense of everything literally falling apart is definitely in the Play That Goes Wrong, and in a lot of other stuff I've done. That is how far can we destroy this stage at this point. Tom and Jerry gags. I'd love to drop a bowling ball on someone's head, but I'm not telling you who. No, not really. No, I can't think. I'm trying to think through Tom and Jerry. I can't think of a definite. I mean, they are an influence. Of all them and Laurel and Hardy have influenced everything I've done, really. But
I'm so glad you brought them up. Because you brought them up before, and then I was like,
and that question was already on the list.
Yeah, that question was already on the list. I just didn't know what languages you'd done the Play That Goes Wrong, because I knew which countries that it had been in, but I tried to find translations, and I didn't know whether, because it's been to China and everywhere, hasn't it? But sometimes they're in English.
Not all. Yes, there've been some English language productions. Not all of the productions have been replica productions.
Right.
So replica takes the direction, the design, and everything, takes our set and our choreography. Whereas if you're just buying the rights to the script, then you have to do it in your own way. And now in America, it's now licensed for kind of non-professional productions as well.
God,
one of my
imagine
students
their
is actually
injuries.
working on one. Well, he's actually working as a fight coordinator on one for like a community theatre out in the sticks somewhere. But yeah, I think
good luck
you
to
do
him.
have to be careful.
Well, it's been amazing to see you today, so thank you very much.
You too, lovely to talk to you.
For me, this is like the most bittersweet interview because I just loved it, and I was devastated that I wasn't there in person to chat to him more, because everything he was talking about, I could have picked his brains about for hours.
And just so funny that I brought up he brought up Tom and Jerry, and then I asked him about Tom and Jerry, so that shows how in sync we were.
That is amazing that happened. But also, I think it's incredible as well. I'd read 2 books prior to us doing Twice Nightly. One about the history of slapstick and one about famous double acts. And neither book mentioned Tom and Jerry.
Well, they should.
Shouldn't they? Because actually, when you think about it, they are like, especially, they are like children's introduction to slapstick and to double acts.
And comedy, really.
And comedy, absolutely.
And it transcends language as well, which is something else that we were talking about with Mark as well.
Completely.
What was so funny as well was when he was talking about sellotaping chairs together, and that health and safety would have come down and got them. Because what happened to our chairs, Mike, about an hour before we went on stage last week in Twice Nightly?
Fell apart, didn't it? Just fell apart. Fell apart.
Absolutely fell apart, and we had to gaffer tape them together.
The chair was 90% gaffer tape.
But they survived. And actually, my sister is the one that sourced those chairs for us, and she'll be listening to this now. Hi, Amy. And she doesn't know about that. She's probably going to be very angry that we didn't tell her about this prior to the performance.
Amy, thank you. You did an incredible job, by the way. That was the real reason that I purposely made my moustache fall off, so that you wouldn't notice the chairs. Well, I've loved this week's episode. I've loved the interview. I've loved talking about all the different stuff that we've talked about. See, variety comes in all different shapes and sizes, doesn't it? All these different forms.
It really does. And we would absolutely love it if you would join us again next week when we explore further the world of music hall and variety. But in the meantime, if you could give us a like, rate, or review our podcast on either Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you find your podcast, then we would really, really appreciate it, as it helps us get the message out to other people who have the same passions as us.
And don't forget to subscribe as well so that you get informed every time that we upload a new episode.
And if you would like to know more about us, join us over at our Instagram page, which is Frame This Presents.
See you next week.
It's more in case you wanted to be like, yes, and we won the Olivier.
Well, we did win the bloody Olivier for Best Comedy. I also won Broadway Awards Best Direction. Thank you very much from the public vote.
Did you?
I did.
I did. Oh, and the public as well. I think that was quite nice,
vote,
yeah.
The Tonys did not care for me, but the public lapped it up.
There we go. I'll stick that in. Okay.
No, only if you're clear I'm taking the piss.